Hello everyone. I am Jasmine V.M., Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, St.Joseph's College, Devagiri. Welcome. Today I'll be handling the topic hypothesis, and the entire module consists of meaning, types, sources, functions, characteristics, and evaluation of hypothesis. But in this module or in this session, I'll be talking only about meaning, types, and sources of hypothesis. Okay, just before going into the topic hypothesis, it is very essential to know about what is meant by statistical inference. Statistical inference is a process by which we draw a conclusion about some measure of the population on the basis of a sample value. From the population, we will be selecting some samples, and from the samples, we will be conducting some tests and measures are being taken, and on the basis of which we will be drawing some statistical inferences. That is what I mean by statistical inference. Here we can understand this statistical inference into two. The first one is test of hypothesis and another one is estimation of population parameters. Okay, what are the special features of this hypothesis? Hypothesis is a tentative proposition formulated for empirical testing. So it is a tentative proposition. Then it is a declarative statement combining concepts. And it is a tentative answer to a research question. It can be tested and verified. In sum total, we can understand a hypothesis is a declarative statement and a tentative answer to a research question, and it contains some concepts, and this concept should have some amount of testability and verifiability. Thus, some important persons have also contributed definitions towards it. Lundberg defines hypothesis as tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. Good and Hack defines in another way, and it is a proposition which can be put to test to determine its validity. Okay, thus hypothesis is a specific testable prediction. It describes in concrete terms what you expect will happen in a certain circumstances. So, in example, we can better understand about the concept hypothesis. Does training staff in change management help staff to cope with the change in their organization? It's a research question. And from this research question, the tentative statement that can be drawn is staff trained in change management copes easily with change in their organization. More explanation is just like this. This hypothesis predicts that the staffs that undergo training in change management can easily cope with the changes that might occur in their organization than perhaps the staff that not been trained in change management. Trained people may have a positive effect, or trained people do not go for a change. So this kind of understanding can be done with the hypothesis. So hypothesis is doing some kind of experiment, and in experiment we will be framing two types of hypothesis, that is null hypothesis, which is H0, and alternative hypothesis is H1. And from which only eating fish. There is another example, that is, does eating only fish increase IQ? Fish eating, whether it lead to an increased IQ? And hypothesis can be H0 and H1, that is alternate null and alternative hypothesis. And we can have the experiment. No significant difference between these two groups. That is the null hypothesis, and alternative can be there is significant difference. Though here we can, after conducting this experiment, we may be accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis. That is what the hypothesis framing. Then hypothesis is something that's science and it is research. And types of hypothesis may include descriptive hypothesis, relational hypothesis, working hypothesis, null, statistical, common sense, complex, and analytical hypothesis. Then, first of all, we can go through the descriptive hypothesis. Descriptive hypothesis are propositions that describe the characteristics of a variable. The variable may be object, person, organization, situation, or event. It encourages to think about the implications of a supported or rejected findings. They are useful for testing statistical significance. Example, the rate of unemployment among the arts graduate is higher than that of commerce graduate. It indicates that whether we want to check whether the unemployment among arts graduate is more than that of the commerce graduate among the commerce graduate. So for that type of testing, we will be framing a descriptive hypothesis. And another one is talking about relational hypothesis. Relational hypothesis are propositions which describe the relationship between two variables which respect to some in respect to some case. Relational hypothesis may be correlation or it can be explanatory. A correlational hypothesis is a statement indicating that variables occur together in some specified manner without implying that one causes the other. It may be negative or positive, particular way of change, particular manner or a way or manner it may change or some kind of difference occurs. It may be a positive or it may be a negative one. But in the case of explanatory or causal hypothesis is a statement that describes the relation between two variables in which one variable leads to a specified effect on the other. That means if one causes to the change in other. The lower the rate of labor turnover in a work group, the higher the worker productivity because of some variable some effect is happening. That is what cause or explanatory hypothesis. Thus, relational hypothesis can be of two types, correlational and explanatory. Then we can go towards the null hypothesis. Okay, these are hypothesis statements denying what are explicitly indicated in working hypothesis. They do not exist in reality. They state that no difference exists between the parameter and the statistic being compared. There is no difference is going to happen, no change is going to happen. Such a tentative statements are called the null hypothesis. They are more exact and found to be very useful. And another one is alternative hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis is just contrary to the null hypothesis. It is a proposition that states something is happening, a new theory is true instead of an old one. That means after testing we are rejecting the null hypothesis and we will be accepting the alternative hypothesis. So an example, interesting example, we can more better understand. Here a boy is proposing a girl and will you marry me? He is just asking. So here can be two types of hypothesis. Here the lady can change her position or she is not willing to make any kind of difference into her status. If she wishes to make or accept some changes to her present status, then alternative hypothesis can be accepted, and if she is not at all interested to change her status, she will be framing the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis means here there is no significant difference in the status. That means I reject the null hypothesis. She is just replying that I reject the null hypothesis. What is meant by that? she is rejecting the proposition. Which is the proposition? She would not like to accept the no difference status. She would like to accept the difference in status of her position. How this difference in position may happen? By accepting his proposal. So by accepting his proposal, she will be changing or willing to change her status. Thus, change in status is possible only through rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting the alternative one. Thus, the boy is here. We can understand yes, reject means yes because the null hypothesis means no change. And again, we can go towards the other types of hypothesis which include the directional hypothesis. This hypothesis are predict some direction, what is going to happen, in what way it may happen. That kind of prediction is going to happen. But in non-directional hypothesis, those where one does not predict the kind of effect but can state the relationship. There are variable and there are relationship, but it is not helpful to predict the direction. That type of hypothesis is called a no-directional hypothesis. Another one is common sense hypothesis. That means with our available common sense idea that we can talk about, we can have a testing and we can come into a conclusion. They are often confused mixture of glitches and moral judgments. Uniformity is perceived through day-to-day observations. We are coming into that conclusion. And in complex hypothesis, this aim at testing the existence of logically derived relationship between empirical uniformities. The function is to create tools and problems for further research in otherwise very complex areas of investigation. More and more complex areas will be uh, proposed for further testing. Statistical hypothesis is another one, and it is also called a confirmatory data analysis, which is a method statistical inference. These are statements about statistical population and are derived from sample. These are quantitative in nature and that they are numerically measurable. And another one is analytical hypothesis. It is concerned with the cause and effect relationship of analytical variables. This occurs at highest level of abstraction and specify relationship between changes in one property and changes in another. It is also called translation manual. Okay, now we may come into the end of this part and we can just understand the various sources of hypothesis. From where we can frame the hypothesis? From theory, yeah, then from observation, then intuition, personal experience, findings of other studies, state of knowledge, culture, and continuity of research. Okay, from all this we can have the hypothesis framing. And what are the special features of this hypothesis or the special matters to be concerned? Conceptual clarity is most important. Then specificity is other important aspect. Testability, availability of technique, theoretical relevance, consistency, objectivity, simplicity, exact, and no conflict. These are considered as the other aspects. From this, we can have the conclusion of this area of the session. Thus, we have just tried to understand the concept hypothesis. It is a combined concept and it is testable kind of tentative answer to the researcher. And again, we can try to understand the different types of hypothesis and how this null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis is taking place. Then from where we can have the hypothesis and various characteristics of hypothesis. Thus, thank you for listening this session. Okay, I think you are better understood about the concept hypothesis and hope you have enjoyed the session. Try to understand the other aspects which I have not explained in this session. Okay, thank you.